Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here. In this video, we are going to have a look at vocal tuning using Cubase's VariAudio. Firstly, if you are new to my channel and new to my videos and you like what you see, please click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. So VariAudio by Cubase, this is a vocal tuning tool that is included for free as a part of Cubase Pro at least. I'm not sure about the lower levels, but definitely check it out to see if it's in there. The big advantage to this vocal tuning tool is that it is integrated into Cubase. So obviously if you're a Cubase user, the integration is a big bonus and can speed up your workflow and make things work a little bit smoother than trying to get a third-party tool in. So let's just get into it, and I'll show you how I use VariAudio. So we've got a song here from a client of mine, Joe Massatano, that I'm going to demonstrate this on. So I thank him for that. It can be a little bit awkward for vocalists to show that sort of material and to allow them to let me play raw material to people and then show tuning and stuff like that. So it's very much appreciated that I get the chance to do this. With VariAudio, basically we just have a vocal track here, and the way to get in there is we just double click on it and we open up the sample editor here. So you'll see here, this is the waveforms of the audio. And the first thing we need to do is, here's our VariAudio here. So if we don't have that open, we click on it to open VariAudio. And then all we need to do is just click on this little arrow here against pitch and warp, and it will go and analyze the audio. Now, depending on how big your audio file is or how small it is, that can take a long time or a little time, but it's done. And you'll see we've got all of these little red dots everywhere now and blocks. So if we actually zoom in a bit and say get to where our cursor is, now you can start to see some waveform information here. So each one of these little blocks is what it has determined to be an independent note. And you can see the line in there is fluctuations in that note. And you get a lot of little things like this here where it's sliding up. That's all natural parts of the normal vocal. We do not sing in flat lines. Our voice pitches and varies and all that sort of stuff. And same here, we hold a note, it can vary and pitch. Where we get a little bit of waviness, that's probably a little bit of vibrato there. Where we start to get big wavy, it could be that it's misdetected and it could be two separate notes, or it could just be that we weren't quite accurate with our note there and we sort of pitched a little bit up and down while trying to hold a note. This tool here is not really an automatic tool, okay? So if you think of something like auto-tune where you place the plugin on and it's automatically tuning as the vocal is playing or being sung in, this is not like that. So this tool is sort of done after the fact. So we've got all our notes here, we've got them all detected. Now we can do a few things here. We can highlight certain parts, which is a very good way to do it. So we can be playing the song, listening to it, and then picking some notes. For instance, if we just play this for a little bit.
So baby, come over here and tell me what's on your mind. Life can be crazy, it's so hard to define. So don't keep me waiting, don't let me be misunderstood. Don't keep me waiting.
So we might say here, that note there, I didn't like that note, it wasn't quite in. We can manually move it to find a note that's suitable.
Don't keep me waiting.
Now that's no good.
Don't keep me waiting. Don't keep me waiting.
And it's automatically locking to where we're placing it, but we can hold down the shift key while I move it, and I can move it freely. If I'm not holding the shift key and I just move it, it takes it in note values. But you'll notice there it's not quite on center, so it's staying at the pitch that it was when it was discovered, right? So as it analyzed it, it found that it was not 100% on pitch, it was slightly off. But when we move it based on that slightly off pitch as well, but just into different notes. But if I hold the shift key on my keyboard and do it, I can manually move this to exactly where I want it. But the other feature we can do is, okay, let's say we don't really know, we want to do something and we want to quantize it to the pitch. We want to get it on pitch. So we can highlight that note and then come across here to the quantize, and we can drag this. And as we drag it, you'll see the note moving. So that, if we go fully across, means that it's 100% quantized to the note, but we may not want to be that perfect. We may just want to do a little bit or a fair bit, but not quite 100%. So if we go 100%, we end up with this,
Don't keep me waiting. Don't let me.
which sounds good, but the last note there is still not good either. So we could go again 100%.
Don't keep me waiting. Don't let me. Don't keep me waiting. Don't let me.
So you'll notice there when I went to 100% quantized on this note here, it actually brought it down. But when it's bringing it down, if you look across here on the notes, we're hitting a C sharp. And in that case, this case here, it may not be in key. So when I moved it up to a D, it sounded a lot better.
Don't keep me waiting. Don't.
So we could just drop the quantize down if we wanted. We could take it all the way back off.
Don't keep me waiting. Don't.
We could bring it up a little bit.
Don't keep me waiting. Don't. Don't keep me waiting. Don't let me.
So you want to play with the setting here to get the best possible sound. You want it to sound natural. You don't want it to sound like it's been tuned. And 100% may make it perfect pitch, but may start to introduce some artifacts and might not sound so natural. So you may want to bring it down a little bit because you know that the note was never going to be 100% on pitch anyway. So it might sound a bit more natural to go that stage.
Keep me waiting. Don't let me.
So we can do that throughout the song on selected notes or anything like that, which is probably the best way to do it because you are trying to keep as much of the vocal natural without being tuned at all. But the other way to do it is to actually select all of the notes. So I'm just pressing Control A on my keyboard, and now I've selected all of the notes. And when I've done that, I can now quantize every single note on the entire vocal track to whatever level I want. So if you just want to do a little bit of tuning across the board, just to tuck them in a little bit, get them closer to the notes, then you can select everything, do a little bit, and then go through and manually edit all the ones as much as possible. Or you could go 100% if that's what you're aiming for and you find that to be natural. So the most common thing that happens when you do quantizing like that to pitch and tuning is that if the person's been off note enough, so let's say they're going, this note here, they were going for a D, but they sort of hit about here. When you quantize, there's a chance that it's either going to quantize up or quantize down based on where it goes. So you might find that it actually puts it to the wrong note. So it's a good idea to actually listen through the song a few times because you may need to adjust these notes based on that, because it doesn't know what note you should have been hitting. It just knows that you want to tune it to the closest note unless you set a key, okay? But in this one here, we don't have that ability. We just manually go for what we're doing. Now, the other thing that can happen here is that, say in the case of this note here, you might see that there's this big dip here, or sorry, a big bump here. Now, what that could be is that could be actually a second note, and the software hasn't detected that. Now, that can cause you problems because when you go to tune it or quantize it to pitch, because it thinks it's one note, it puts it in the one spot. Whereas this one here, this section here might be best at this note, but this section here might be best at the next note up. So if you find any of those, what you can do is you can go to the segment, click on the segments there, and then when you come across here, you can actually get a little pair of scissors, come up there, and we can clip it. Then when we clip it, we then have the ability to quantize those notes again, so we can bring them in. And again, it has put it to the same note. So if we go back to our pitch and warp, we can now drag this note up separately and this one down here. So that's definitely something that happens quite a lot, because even though the software is very powerful, sometimes it does struggle to detect different notes, especially if you do not clearly define those different notes in your vocal passage, or if you are a little bit pitchy, it can't always detect those notes cleanly. So there will be times where you'll need to come in and manually clip some of these notes in half or in sections to be able to define those notes a bit better. Now, you'll also notice that in VariAudio, we have this setting here called straighten pitch. Now, what that is useful for is that sometimes you might find that you've got a vocalist that is not very confident, they're very pitchy. And when I say pitchy, like they're hitting the note, but the sustain of the note fluctuates too much and makes it sound like it's going in and out of a tune while holding that note. So that can be very handy to fix that up a little bit. So say we pick this note here, let's say we notice this fluctuation is just way too much. It's starting to sound like it's going in and out of tune. We can then again control this dial here, and you'll see as I'm doing that, it's flattening out that waveform. So we start to get everything more in pitch. And if we go fully, we end up with a flat line. Now, you won't want a flat line unless you're going for a weird effect, which is what I'll talk about in future videos. But right now, you're just going to want to adjust this to reduce that fluctuation enough where it sounds natural, but it also sounds like it's not going out of tune. So if we just listen to that little part.
Over here and tell me why. Over here and over here and tell me. Over here and tell me.
So that's really a short bit there. Let's see if we can find a longer note. So if we look at this note here, if you were to say that was a little bit out of key going in and out there, you can flatten that out a bit like that. And suddenly you've made that note make sure that it still sounds fairly natural, but it's also staying on the note closer. You want a little bit of variance in the vocal there. You don't want a flat line, but you don't want it peaking too much in and out of these notes so that it starts to sound out of tune. So again, you can do that on individual notes, or you could do it across the board by Control-A, select the whole lot, and just do a little bit of straightening across the lot. It all depends on the vocalist, what the quality of the vocal is, and what you prefer to do in this regard. My preference is always only to edit or tune what you really need to tune, not just to assume to tune everything. I actually like to listen and make a call on what I think needs to be tuned. So another technique we can do in here is also shortening and lengthening notes. So we might find that the timing of a note is not quite right, or it was a little bit too long or a little bit too short. And we can actually, in the same thing, grab the corner here and we can drag it to be longer, which shortens this note before as well. So it's changing the phrasing. We could go the other way, or we could even go both ways. So let's just put that back to default and just have a listen to this note.
Otherwise it's gone. Otherwise it's gone. Otherwise it's gone. Otherwise it's gone. Otherwise gone. Otherwise gone.
Now, obviously that sounds horrible, but you get the idea. So if you do find that you've got a note that just seems a little bit too short,
Otherwise it's gone.
then you can just do little tweaks. But again, you need to be careful because you want it to sound natural. So there's no point doing anything strange. The best way to do things is to get another take of a vocal or something like that. But there are times that you might just want to do a little bit of a tweak here just to extend a tiny bit. And you can do that with this tool here. And we can even do some other things here, like we can grab the edge here and we can pull up one side of the note to adjust the pitch on an angle. So we could go this side, or we could go down. Same with this side, we could go down. So we're changing the pitch of that all together. Now you can also do some artistic type things. So you could grab this note and pitch it up extremely high. So let's say the note was an A. You might want to take it up an octave.
Otherwise it's gone.
And you might do that for an entire phrase, not for a whole thing, one part, but you might just say, okay, I want to octave this up.
Otherwise it's gone. I'll get you.
And that sounds really horrible, but you get the idea. And the couple of advantages and the great things about the inbuilt one here is it's very easy to bypass. So let's make an obvious change here. So we've just moved this section up.
Otherwise it's gone. I'll get you.
Absolutely out of tune now, but we can quickly bypass that just by clicking on there.
Otherwise it's gone. I'll get you. It'll kill you nice and slow.
Okay, but the other great thing is that because it's built in, it works a lot better with the audio natively. So for instance here, you've got,
So baby come over here and tell me.
so that's edited out of the way here. But if we close this window here, one thing that you'll find when we do the plugin versions is they can work a bit different. But even though we have tuned and everything else, it's within this program. So we can make adjustments to this track here. And it's reflected in the VariAudio as well.
So baby come over here and tell me what's on your mind. So baby come over.
So we can fade this whole section in.
Come over here and tell.
And that's something you'll find with some of the plugins later that you can't do. And I will show you that later, but just keep this in mind that all the editing that I do on here is automatically reflected in the VariAudio. It's not two separate programs. It's not two separate audio sources. It's the same audio. Everything works perfectly with the software.
Come over here and tell me why.
So even though you can see the notes there, they don't exist.
And tell me what's on your mind.
And you can see that by the grayed out line. So that grayed out line is indicating that originally it detected notes there and they are no longer in the audio source. Well, they're actually in the audio source, but they're not played on here because we have faded them out. So to give you a real example here, let's just say we concentrate on this section here.
So baby, come over here and tell me what's on your mind. Life can be crazy, it's so hard to define.
So in this case here, we might just say, okay, I'm going to select all the notes and I'm just going to quantize just a bit, say halfway. And I might even just straighten a tiny bit as well. And then we end up with this.
So baby, come over here and tell me what's on your mind. Life can be crazy, it's so hard to define.
And that sounds pretty good to me. So let's find another section.
So if you want the world to smile with you, then you gotta let it go.
Okay, so let's target this section here because it does have a bit of pitch problems there. So let's start off by selecting the notes. And I'm again going to quantize a bit. I'm going to straighten a little bit. And then we're going to have a listen.
So if you want the world to smile with you.
This note here is obviously not working. Now I can see that note there is a dip and there's a bit up here. So I suspect it hasn't detected two notes there. So I'm going to actually chop this in the middle there. And then I'm going to re-quantize those two. And then I'm going to move one up and we're going to have a listen to what that does.
So if you want the world to smile with you.
It's close, but it's not quite right. Let's drop it back down.
So if you want the world to smile with you.
Okay, this note needs to be quantized a lot more because it's way out.
So if you want the world to smile with.
And now it's flat.
So if you want the world to smile with you, then you gotta let it go.
And that one there sounds a bit off as well.
So if you want the world to smile with you, then you gotta let it go.
Okay, I'm happy with that note. I'm still not 100% happy with this one.
So if you want the world to smile with you. So if you want the world to smile with you. So if you want the world to smile with you. So if you want the world to smile with you.
Okay, I'm suspecting that we chopped it in the wrong spot. So I'm going to quantize those. And I'm going to bring that one up to there. And now let's have another listen.
So if you want the world to smile with you, then you gotta let it go.
Not sure about that note there either.
So if you want the world to smile with you, then you gotta let it go.
Okay, so it's not perfect. There's still something about this note that's not quite not quite working for me, but it's a lot better. Now it could be the trailing edge.
So if you want the world to smile with you, then
So we could try that. So there's a lot of trial and error in this, depending on the vocal. So we could do that and see what that sounds like.
so if you want the world to smile with you, then
That's not really working.
so if you want the world to smile with you.
Yeah, that sounded better down there, unfortunately. So that's not the problem there. There's still something not quite right with this, but these things aren't perfect. It's about getting to an acceptable level.
So if you want the world to smile with you, then you gotta let it go.
It's definitely a lot better than where we were before, and I'm fairly happy with that. We could work a little bit more on it, a little bit harder trying to get it right, but if we do too much, we're going to start to get some artifacts and get some sounds that sound a little bit weird. Even now, we are introducing a little bit of artifacts in there, but it's not too bad at the moment. So I'm quite happy with that. So we would continue that process through the entire song and get it sounding really good. And I like to do this process and then go away and listen to the song in the car, let it settle for a bit, and I might find that some of the stuff I've done is not quite working, or I might still hear some other notes that need to be tuned, but then I come back and start working on those little bits as well, because you can work on something so long that you start to become numb to the sounds and you start missing some of the notes, or you start to accept some of the off notes as being okay because you get so used to listening to them. So I find going away, getting, refreshing my ears, forgetting about the song for a little bit, and then having another listen to it can give me another fresh perspective on it. And I will start to hear some of the notes again sounding right, and I'll be able to make a clearer call on that. So we can leave this in this state if we want to, but we can also flatten this and lock it in by going over to the process section here and clicking on flatten. So if we were to do that right now, we can go flatten there. Algorithms real time, off it goes, it does it. And then you'll see here, if we go back to VariAudio, the notes are gone, that's done, but you will find
So if you want the world to smile with you, then
that section has been tuned and we have flattened it. So it's sort of a bit like a freeze or bounce or whatever you want to call, but a very quick way of flattening it. So if you're somebody that likes to just commit to what you've done, lock it in, don't need this VariAudio anymore, bang, you've done it, it's all good. That can also be very handy to transport to other DAWs or to other people, other mix engineers, whatever else, because they may not have this software. So to have the VariAudio component still sitting there will not work in their DAW. So you're basically bouncing the tracks out, flattening them so that you can move them to anywhere else. And you're not reliant on this VariAudio anymore. And we can actually undo that and go straight back into it again if we want to. Now, there's a lot of advanced features. Now, we're not going to go into all of the features in this because there's so many. But one other one that I just wanted to show you, which can be quite handy, is let's say we have two parts here. We might have a double track or some BGVs or something like that, and you want to tune them together. But sometimes it can be a bit hard. You got to tune one at a time, and then you're trying to find which notes out, that sort of thing. But if you select two audio files together, and then we hit enter on the keyboard, we can open up both of them in the same window together. Now, it's a little bit hard to see, but you'll see a bright colored red one is the track that we're currently selected. And then there's a light colored red down there. Okay, so it's sort of behind it. So if I click on it, we've now swapped tracks. If I click on the other one, we've swapped tracks again. Okay, so this way we can see clearly where there's notes that are differing. If we wanted these to be perfectly pitched together, you could just easily scroll along here and see, say this note here is definitely off. Okay, this one's sitting up here on an F sharp, and this one here is sitting closer to an F. So which one is right? You just make your call, and then you drag them down and match them up. And now they'll be in perfect pitch there. See in here, this is not quite right, but this one here you can see is not quantized. I could hold the shift key and manually move it up to match. And we could do that again with here. And you could do that with as many tracks as you want. If you had 8 BGV tracks and you wanted to tune them all to be exactly the same, the process I would probably take would be to do each one individually, just doing a basic quantize, listing, getting them sounding right. And then I would bring all 8 up on the screen, and I would listen through and I would see if anything was obviously different like this, and I would then adjust them to get them more in line. And that is a really good feature in VariAudio, the ability to be able to do this and see where the obvious out of tune notes are between tracks. You know, you can see here, this note here is not even close to this note here. Now, sometimes that might be deliberate because there might be parts that are slightly different, singing in different harmonies, that sort of thing. But other times you'll want them to be perfectly lined up. So again, as I said, there's a lot more features that you can do, but they're primarily the basic functions that you're going to use to tune vocals in Cubase VariAudio. Anything else from that is going to be a lot more extreme, and it's not going to be very common that you're going to do that sort of stuff. So there you go. There is VariAudio by Cubase. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. Do you use it? Obviously, you have to be a Cubase user to use it because it is part of it. It's not a separate tool. But if you are a Cubase user, please let me know what you think. Do you use it? Or do you still prefer third-party tools or anything else? Do you have any issues? If you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. I'd love to help wherever I can. If you found the video useful, please click the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. Hopefully the video has been helpful. I thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.